isn't a polished Bible study tutorial. This is my actual unfiltered average morning time in the Word with my coffee and my colored pencils, messy hair and messy notes, and probably a couple interruptions by my kids. If you've ever wondered what real Bible study time looks like for me on the average day-to-day, then this is it. Let's begin. Hiya friends! My attempt in this video is to make it as very real and very unfiltered as possible. Just morning Bible study with me. It is a gloomy Saturday morning. There's a window behind you and it's just so gloomy. It's so vibey. The boys are finishing up a little bit of cartoons and I want to study a little bit more in prep for a Bible study that I'm doing. And I figured I would take you guys along on what it typically looks like. I think this is literally going to be the most unfiltered video ever. Like I didn't do my hair for you guys. This is how my hair typically looks. If you see me out in public, it will probably always be in a messy bun. I did put on makeup, but I wasn't gonna change my outfit. Like these are my real pajamas. You get my morning breath and everything. No, I'm kidding. I just want this to be realistic. And I think a lot of people have myths about what it looks like when you are a Bible teacher, speaker, author, all the things. I think a lot of people think that I have a perfect Bible study and that I have all the answers, or it's just like picturesque all the time, and it's not. But first off, let me give you a walk through my setup. This is an IKEA big dining room table. We had this dining room table for our dining room and I liked it so much and it's so big that I was like, this will be my desk. It's also like fairly affordable for size and everything, and I don't need storage. So my desk is always very messy because I can spread out all the commentaries and resources that I want to all around me and have the colored pencils and have the prayer journals sitting out if I need to grab them and respond to something, talk about something with the Lord, or I've got pencil sharpeners or washi tape, charge cords, just like it's a mess. It's a functional mess, I should say that. And then let me give you a little bit of the picture of what it's looking like in my Bible notes today. Some notes I've taken recently, and like when I'm sitting down, what do? I will say I already had my prayer journal time. I could link these if you guys want me to. You can ask in the comments, but they're just very basic bullet journal. And I moved to this for just the fall. Y'all know I like to get very crafty in my prayer journals, but I just wanted a break from that for the fall. And so I just have a very thin, simple prayer journal. This is a crazy fall with my book coming out and everything. And I prayer journaled a little bit about some opportunities and some things that I'm excited about in the future that I just wanted to give to the Lord. And so I already did that. And now I'm sitting down to Bible study. I did prayer journal first, but some days I do it after. You know, it's different every day. Now let me show you my Bible notes. All right, so first things first, if you're new here, I do have a very big journaling Bible. It's an interleaf Bible, it's ESV, and I can link it below, but it's not gonna look like this. I've gotten it rebound, and it's so thick now because of all the notes I've added. Because I've read through my Bible every year for so many years now, I don't know if it's 5 or 6, I've taken a lot of notes because I take notes like every time I open my Bible and I go in depth or learn something new. And so whenever I open up my Bible to a passage, I always have pre-existing notes to review because I do read them basically every single time I read a passage. I'm sure there's exceptions, but basically every single time if I see a note, I'm gonna read it so I can build off of it. That's the whole reason why it's there. There's always gonna be notes that I review, that I add to, that I write around, or that I add papers so I could add to. So on the passage that I'm studying today, let me show you what I'm looking at. This is Psalm 103 and 104. Over here's the start of 103, 102, and the end of 101. And you've probably heard me talk about this because it's been such a big part of my life for the last couple years. I have been working through the Psalms every single week on my Patreon. Patreon is like a crowdfunding website. They pay anywhere from $5 to $25 a month and they get exclusive Bible studies from me. And so for the last 3-ish years, we've been going through the Psalms about one every week. Obviously we missed some weeks because of travel or the holidays or whatever, but we've been working through the Psalms. It has been so enriching, such rich studies, but as you can see, my Psalms are tore up in the best way possible. These Psalms have so many notes in them. Let's flip back over. This week I've been in Psalm 104, and as you can see, I have some flaps going on. I have honestly been studying this Psalm for kind of like 2 weeks. This past week I recorded the audiobook for my new book, No More Boring Bible Study, which comes out this November, that you should definitely pre-order if you haven't already. If you're subscribed, if you watch my content, if you love Bible study content, and if you love studying the Word, or you want to love studying the Word, this is the book for you. But I spent all week recording the audiobook, and so I wasn't studying 104 like normal. I kind of need to play catch up a little bit, and I started it extra early and I'm finishing it extra late just because my time was spent in different ways. Typically, I spend about on average 10 hours a week on these Psalm studies, researching them, just because I want to do my best in them. And people literally pay to watch those Bible studies, so I want to give them their money's worth. Like, I want to give them the best kind of Bible study possible and read a bunch of different resources and all that. So as you can see, I've already been studying 104. I've read it at least 10 to 15 times. Y'all know reading a passage over and over and over again is going to make things stick out to you. You'll start to see more repetition or themes, or just you'll notice something different every single time. I read it like every day last week, and then I've read it obviously at least once or twice a day this week. Hey baby, you can come here. What are you doing? Did you finish your cartoons?
Yeah.
Can you say hi? Those are our YouTube friends. Who are you dressed up as today?
Stitch.
Yeah, you're Stitch today, huh? I forget what I was saying, but I've spent probably 5 hours on it already, and I want to do some more study towards filming next week. And as you can see, the page is by no means full, but there's already a lot of notes on the page. So I have this flap here, which is just some scrapbook paper. It's like not as thick as cardstock, but it's, you know, cute and decorative. So this is for Psalm 103, but I needed it all to be on one page. So here's the text here. There's some more over here, but there was no room for notes. So I just went on Bible Gateway and printed off Psalm 103 in my translation and taped it here. And then I had all this room for notes. I eventually ran out, so I added this second part to the flap that folds out this way, and I could take my notes here. So when you lift the flap, you kind of start reading here, read down, then finish over here, and there's all these notes around it. I know it looks really intense, but once you just kind of zoom in a little bit closer, it's pretty straightforward. So that's an interesting flap. Then over here, these are all Psalm 104 notes, and then all of this is mostly Psalm 104. There's a couple Psalm 103. All right, so Sutton just left, and I guess he's gonna build Legos or play outside. We live out in the country, so the boys can play outside with a walkie-talkie. They do that most days, which is great. But there are, like last Saturday, it was also a gloomy Saturday, and the boys just colored next to me while I Bible studied. But typically I do a lot of my studying of a psalm at like coffee shops, in between meetings, waiting to pick up the boys from school, etc. And I will take all of my books with me. I've shared this before, but let me share with you really quickly. I have 4, sometimes like 5-ish, but I have like 4 commentaries I typically start with and use over and over again every single week. Those are the ESV Expository Psalms volume, obviously, the NICOT, New International Commentary on the Old Testament on the Psalms, the Word Biblical, and then once I got to like the second half of the Psalms, I could start using this one. The first half is not published yet. This is the New American Commentary. And then I'll also start throwing in the NIV Application Commentary, Spurgeon's The Treasury of David, etc. So I start with these 4 typically, and I'll carry these around to coffee shops with me. I know, it's crazy. This particular week, I had the time, so I photocopied them. It just feels wasteful though, the paper and ink and stuff. I only do this in extra stressful weeks where I really feel like it's gonna be a big nuisance to carry my books, like audiobook week, where I didn't wanna have these books sitting in my car all day in the hot sun outside of the studio. But I wouldn't recommend you order those 4 necessarily. I would recommend you start with Spurgeon's Commentary on the Psalms, The Treasury of David, or like the NIV Application, or the ESV Expository. This one's expensive, but I like it a lot. I would not recommend you start with these 2 especially. These 2 are the more elevated commentaries that I use and actually like. Some of them are just like, okay, there's so much. I could just make a video just about commentaries, and I know I have a whole commentary tour that you can find on my channel. I'll try and remember to have it linked in the description box. But whenever you're reading a more elevated commentary and there's footnotes, pay attention to the footnotes. This is the Word Biblical, and they give a biography section, and you can see, oh, this is who they read, this is who they used, and go read those commentaries. Go check out those commentaries, go purchase them, go read them, go see what exactly they're referring to. The NICOT does this as like footnotes right here. Tiny little text that gives you the citations of where they got some of their information. And they'll often refer, especially this one, will often refer to debates that are more on like the liberal end of theology. Now, okay, here's another thing I need to explain. Whenever I talk about more liberal or conservative theologians, that's not the same as liberal liberal or conservative politics. Sometimes they coincide, sometimes they don't coincide, and most of the time they're dealing with totally different issues. I would not recommend you guys go by and read the Nikot unless you're a seasoned commentary user and Christian, because they are more liberal in their theology, and that's not just with like LGBTQ or those kinds of big concepts we tend to think about when we talk about the word liberal. They are more so just constantly doubting the subtitles, like this was written by David when he was in a cave from Saul. Like that's what they're constantly dealing with. They're constantly questioning, was this original to the text or was this added later? They're constantly asking those hard, scary questions. Y'all guys are a little low right now. And I just know that that's not usually what's going to be super edifying in our Bible studies. There are issues that we want to be aware of if we're in-depth studying, and maybe that will point us to a conversation done by a scholar that's like very helpful. But most of the time, those discussions aren't going to be edifying. They're going to take us away from a worshipful reading of the text to a more critical reading of the text. We're not scholars. We don't have to step into those lanes as much unless there's some kind of theological outworking from it. Most of the time, it's not one of substance, and we can avoid those issues. So when I read the Nikot, I totally read over. I don't read over. I quickly have to discern, okay, is that a conversation of any value to me when I'm trying to in-depth study? Because I have a high view of inerrancy and infallibility. I believe the Bible is true in everything that it claims, and I believe the original document was errorless. Actually, honestly, I know you're gonna think that I'm just plugging this, but all of these things are talked about in chapter 2, especially of my book that's coming out in November. You guys have got to check it out if you haven't already. If you have liked any of my videos that I've ever made, if you like these kinds of conversations that I'm having right now, this is the book for you. I talk all about this and more in the book. I also have really good footnotes that I would encourage you to check out as you're reading my book. But let's get back to commentaries. So the Nikot, I like reading it. And you know, most people would say, okay, Faith, why do you like reading it then if you're more conservative in your theology or your treatment of the text? I like it because they are very, very literary. They note allusions, themes, repetitions, word studies that a lot of my conservative brothers and sisters that I love, like the ESV, I love them, but they miss it. They miss a lot of depth sometimes because they miss it, because they're not looking at it with a more literary angle. Nancy DeClasse Walford, I would not agree with her on some of her outworkings on women, gender, etc. But I do like her literary gifting to see things in the text that I would otherwise have missed. In fact, because I've read her almost now from cover to cover and eaten this up, she's actually trained my eyes to see some things that the psalmists do that I would otherwise miss. In some ways, she's been like a mentor for me and taken me in deeper studies of the literary tools in the Bible. But when it comes to theological depth, application, exegesis, and not eisegesis, the ESV expository is probably my favorite. I think they do a very good job of being worshipful in all of their exegesis, and that's where the Nikot lacks. So I would recommend everybody buy this, even though at times I feel like they miss a couple things that are in the text that I would like them to note. Other times they note things that the Nikot looks over. So, you know, it's checks and balances a lot of the time. But that's why I use those. I must read through them and know everything that they say, everything that they cite, everything that the conversations that they bring up before I ever even think about filming my Psalm study on Patreon. These are musts for me. Then, typically I don't read this one cover to cover. Typically I reference this one when there are really problematic texts, like the translation is really weird. The NKJV translates it one way and then the NLT translates it a whole other way. That's when I go here and I look at their word studies. If you don't know, the Word Biblical Commentary is a commentary set that's more so intended for pastors and those who have Greek and Hebrew training. It's not going to be readable if you don't have a level of Greek and Hebrew training, probably. The Word Biblical is great in that it really is very wordy. It's a great commentary for word studies. If you love word studies and you know a little bit of Greek and Hebrew, you'd probably like this commentary. It's not super readable though. It's very much you're chewing on steak the whole time. And I don't know if I've ever seen great application from this commentary. I mean, like, okay, I randomly opened up to Psalm 85. It says, the message is one of encouragement and assurance, designed to build confidence and hope. As I've read it, verse 9d, which means if it's broken down, it's like the fourth line, is a warning by the speaker to the people not to turn back to old ways of folly, which would nullify the saving work of Yahweh. The apostasy of the past should be avoided. And then they cite something. Yeah, that's true. They're really good at making connections to other parts of the Bible, but they're just not gonna be very like pastoral. They're on the total other end of the spectrum from Boyce. When it comes to exegesis and exposition, you're gonna get a lot more pastoral application. This is what it means for your life from Boyce, and you're gonna get a lot more like meaty, this is a word study, this is the history, this is the connections to other parts of the Bible. And you might, if you're a normal person, be like, so what So what now? And that's when like people like Boyce or the EXV expository come in. Now finally is the Knack. This is also a must for me to read through. I tend to read this cover to cover like I do with the ESV and the NICOT, but I will skip over parts if I'm like, okay, we get it. Because sometimes they can just really nail home an idea that I think is pretty basic or feels very basic after reading through what these guys said for 10 plus pages. Just reading through those 4 typically takes me at least, if I'm moving fast and it's a short psalm, like 2 to 3 hours. Psalm 104 is a long psalm, so it took me much longer than that, and I'm still not all the way through. So that's where I'm gonna pick up, and you'll always ask me this, so I take notes on anything that builds off of what I already know from the text. That's why I take notes, is to write down what I'm learning that enhances my reading or worship from the text. And then when I come back next year, I wanna add to it. You know, it's been whatever, 12 hours since I've studied it last. I'm gonna wanna read back through my notes, read the text at least once through, Psalm 104, and see what I noticed this morning different. You know, I've played with Stitch, I've drank my coffee, things might hit different. They will hit different. See what I noticed, write that down if it's something that like I don't wanna forget, and just review all the notes I've taken so far. Then I'll pick back up on my reading and anything that they say that enhances my reading of the text. Oh, this word is repeated, and you're like, whoa, I didn't notice that. Or this word is a really important Hebrew word study to do. This word means XYZ. I'm gonna write that down. And if there are any notes from last year or the year before that are kind of pointless, I will cover them up. In fact, there were like little watermelon drawings that I did on this page because originally I took notes all in like pink and green, like watermelon colors, and I covered those up. There's a big note in the center of my page that's taking up a lot of space, and I'm playing with the idea of covering it up. But let me walk you through the notes that I have right now on the page. All right, so here's where the watermelon was. There was one up here that I fully covered with last week's notes. I don't know if you can faintly see the white square of paper, and I just use white sticker paper. It comes in like 8x11 sheets that go through your printer, and that's what I use whenever I'm using cover up. There's also this big green square from like 2 years ago that I wrote. It could have been written in like this amount of space. It didn't need to be written this big, and so that's why I'm playing with the idea of covering it up, but I think I'm in too deep. I'm probably just gonna leave it. You can also see I made a mess up right here when I was originally writing the outline. That's one of the first things I do whenever I'm studying a psalm in depth, is I figure out the outline, and commentaries will give you outlines. I then combine them or use my own discernment on what's the most faithful outline, which requires me to read through the text like at least 4 times at the very minimum. Then I kind of combine the outlines, or I figure out what my outline is. And I was writing it and it just did not fit in the space I had allotted. So I cut off a new piece of paper, glued it down here, and it's now like a little flat, but it gave me enough room to make the outline and make it readable, because it was going to be way too small where it was kind of just unreadable. So I just glued it down where I originally had the square drawn and made it a little bit longer. That's a really simple idea. If you like ever make a mess up, you can just do something like this, and it's just engaging and cute. I could have also had my notes overflow onto this little part, but I thought it was going to be confusing, so I just left it. Now, obviously I am still going through the second half in particular. I haven't written down all the things I've noticed or learned about it. I'm still working my way through. But as you can see, I have an interleaved Bible, so every other page is blank. You see that? And I'm not truly halfway done with my studies, and yet I'm quickly running out of space. I have a little bit more room on this flap right here, and then a little bit of room here. I can write really small and make it work, but I do worry about next year and the year after that, and just building off of this. So this is kind of the turning point that I face of like, hey, do I add another flap like here or here or here for more notes, or even here? If I do it here, I'll have a ton of really long lines, kind of like here. I have really long lines that basically take up a whole page. I mean, it did save me some room. I have a ton of notes here and some notes here and here, but for the most part, there's the bulk of the page right here is all just lines. What I've often done is like, see how here in the middle of the page I added a flap? I had to get really crafty when I had my Ruth course, which guys, if y'all haven't taken that Ruth course, but you like in-depth studies, definitely take my Ruth course. There's like Bible journaling stickers that go along with it. It's a really, really good study, but I had to get really creative because it's only 4 chapters, but it's very, very literary. It's very, very rich. It's very, very beautiful. And so I think this is like the first flap I added, and then I had to add another flap for notes. And then I was still running out of space, so I added these flaps over here. This one folds out this way. There's this one behind it. Then I wrote on the back of that one for over here, and that had to be added on. Do you see how like if you're creative and think about it a little bit ahead of time, you can over triple your space for notes. Now, still, when I come back in 4 years, I might still cover up old notes that are like, oh, I get it. I don't need that written down anymore. But I'm always wanting to leave a little bit of space for notes. And it stresses me out if I don't have any kind of little pockets for notes. Here's some flaps I added. Notice again, there's a pocket for notes in the future. You can see a word study. You can see the outline. Something is said 3 times. Here's another word study. Here's another outline with themes. And so I am thinking that it's about time to add another flap. But instead of explaining it to you, I'm gonna show you. So if it attaches here, a note can slip behind here, or actually a couple notes can come over here. Then this can fold in. It's more than half of what we have left. That gives us a lot more space for notes. And I'll just use this 8mm tape that I get on Amazon. I can have that linked if you can't find it. If we needed to, we could add on to this and then add on to that. We could keep it going as much as needed. That frees up my worries about space. The important thing though is when you draw arrows and take notes, you know, first fill up behind this, then fill up this, then fill up this and this. You have to think about where you're drawing your arrows so that you don't cut off where in the future you might want to take notes. So I would kind of leave this area free for arrows so that if I add a flap up here one day, the arrows could keep extending, etc. My arrows will butt up against each other. That doesn't bother me because they're different colors, so I can tell them apart. So now that we've added more space, let's review all my notes and get back into reading. So just a couple of things, and I don't want to spoil the Patreon study, but this psalm is really cool because it's an inclusio, which means it starts and it ends with the same phrase. And it's really cool because it builds. You move from God as creator to God who creates the things that sustains life, to even talking about like beasts, like leviathans being created and fueled by God and his beautiful creation. And Psalm 103 and Psalm 104 are often referred to as twin psalms, like they go together. We'll talk about all of this and more in the actual psalm study on this psalm. I'm telling you, y'all are missing out. It's all on Patreon. If you join today, you'll get all the previous psalm studies, and every week I post a new one if you're in the top tier. So just saying. It does start to get a little dry in the middle of the psalm where we're just talking about like, okay, God controls the water, then God grows the plants, and then God grows the animals and the beasts and us. It does start to get very, not repetitive, but just kind of like, okay, we get the idea. Like it's a building momentum because all things are under God's control. Like we get it. And where I last left off was verse 21 says, the young lions roar for their prey, and I had circled seeking their food from God, because that's a very good anchoring statement for this psalm of really the point it's trying to make over and over again is that all things are fueled or provided by God. And I wrote in my notes, all provision is from Yahweh, and then got interrupted and had to quit studying. So I kind of want to pick back up with that, and I'm really curious to see what the NAC would say about this. I haven't read the NAC yet, but I feel like they'll have some good expository application on this concept and on this theme of provision by God. That's just my hunch because I've spent a lot of time here. I feel like they would do a good job on it. I could totally be wrong. Let's find out. All right, so I'm gonna be totally honest with you. This did not say anything good, or I should say different than what I've read in other commentaries this week and last week. If you're curious, let me just show you. So this commentary is set up like a pretty typical commentary in that you can see in bold is verse numbers, and then there's like a paragraph of notes on that verse. So when I'm looking up notes on just this particular verse or even phrase, I'll first jump to their notes on that verse and see if they talk about it. Then what I'm gonna do is read before and after that to see if they reference or build up to that verse. In some commentaries, they'll start off a section, depending on how they outline the section, they'll start it off with summary notes on the section as a whole. And sometimes that will give you the answer to your question or give you some really cool quote to read off in your study or write in your Bible. This isn't the NICOT, but you'll get the idea. They have notes on like verses and phrases and all that, but you'll see here, they grouped together verses 18 through 26. They gave it a title for that section, and then here's notes on that section. Then here, they start off with verse 18 and they start giving notes verse by verse again. So sometimes those sections will be super long and really meaty and give you really great summary statements of like the arch of the argument of the letter as a whole or whatever, and that can be gold. So sometimes just referencing a commentary for like their paragraph will be so incredibly worth it. It just depends on the passage, the book, the author, the commentary, etc. What I did now, that wasn't helpful, but it reiterated what the other 3 commentaries that I've read, what they said. So that's still good. It's also just helpful to reread. Yes, this psalm is unpacking the ecosystems that God has set up, the beautiful creation and how dynamic it is and his provision for it all. It's helpful to reread that from different scholars with different resources to back it up, to really nail it in my head. And sometimes I've read something 2 or 3 times and it didn't click for me. I didn't see the point of why they said that. But when I read it the 4th time or the 5th time, then it finally, I'm like, oh, now I get where you're going with that. You know, sometimes it will feel like someone's making something out of nothing, especially in the literary commentaries like the Nikot that I was talking about earlier that's more liberal. They'll say something like, this word is repeated and the synonym of it is used here. And you're like, yeah, but does that really matter? I don't see the theological depth to it. And then another commentary will point it out and explain it better and like, oh, wow, that is really cool. And it finally makes sense. So it's always good to look. Let's actually revisit the ESV expository. That's the black one that I think people would love. Y'all should check it out if you want to. Like, typically their volumes are very expensive though. So I've taken my time to build my library. They're right there, all those black ones. They're like $50, $70 a volume. They're not cheap. They're new. They've come out in recent years and they're well done. So I think they're worth it. But you do you, boo boo. I don't think you're gonna be able to find them used because they're newer, but they're worth it. So you do you, boo boo. Anyway, I'm gonna go back and reread them because I feel like maybe there's something I missed on this area. I feel like I'm not getting all the richness out of it in this section of the Psalm that I read you around verse 21. It seems like they're saying something that I'm missing, I guess. So what happened there is I read the commentary and again, it didn't really answer my question. It actually made me reread the text in a new way of what it said. It said something. I guess it was that they said what the skeptic sees in a meaningless swarm of life, the psalmist teaches as a view of giving some inkling of the creator's wealth. One, that's a cool quote, which comes from Kidner, who's a commentator that they often quote, but that had me read it with a new eye of seeing God's wealth. And I guess that led me to note something that none of them noted, which is crazy. But this section in my outline and in most outlines, it's verses 19 through 23 is like the section that I said I needed to pick up at. This section literally moves from night to day to night. So it looks at the wholeness of a single day to see God's provision, literally moving from night to night, a full day, examining the provision of God in creatures and in humanity. That takes, you know, the phrases that it says, which I circled in pink and y'all saw me do, when it says, and it is night, or when the sun rises, or until the evening. What my brain tends to tell me is like a filler phrase. All of a sudden that stuck out to me. It even starts in verse 19 with the moon marks the season, the sun knows it's time for setting. Like it's looking at time, it's looking at the sky to show through seasons, through nature, through time passing, God proves to be faithful and to be enough to quench the thirst for our souls. I'm saying a lot and I don't even know if it makes sense because it's connected to so many other parts of this psalm, but that was a really important thing that none of the commentaries noted. I was able to identify because of reading all these different commentaries. And so if you ever feel lost in your Bible studies and you don't have like an answer to a very specific question you might have, remember that your task is not always to answer your questions. Your task is to study the text and see new things in it that you otherwise wouldn't see if you didn't have this worshipful reading. Now, obviously I'll be hesitant with something if I recognize it, if I see it and it's not reinforced by another commentary. Like typically I try and go then find out, okay, I feel like it's looking at from night to night, a full day of God's provision, but no commentary said that. Let me go try and find a commentary that does say that just to check myself, just to see, am I off the wall crazy here? You know, I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but it definitely seems like that's what it's doing here. I actually say this all the time in my Psalm videos, like no commentary said this, but I feel like this is what it's doing here. I love when pastors do that, when they cite who they got something from and when they admit, I didn't get this from anybody, but I see this in the text for my studies. That's important to differentiate from. And you can definitely differentiate between those things in your actual Bible notes. I quote commentaries all the time. Sometimes I'll say, I feel like it's doing this in my Bible notes. And then one day if I ever write a Psalms commentary, publishers, you know where to find me. I'll have something to add to the conversations because I've spent the time and I've recognized things in the text that I feel like nobody else recognizes. Now that you get a grip of like what some of my notes look like, how it kind of just happens, let's keep going because I actually need a Bible study today. Like I want to and I need to actually like get into the word. We've done a lot of talking. So now let's just get into it. I won't explain every little note that I take, but you can kind of get the gist of how I pop between them, reread some of them, read new ones. If I pull out my phone, I'm referencing Bible Hub and just looking up the Hebrew, where else that word's been used, etc. Sometimes that can get confusing. Someone asked me that, like, why'd you pull out your phone while you were Bible studying? I was looking at Bible Hub. It's just easier than pulling out my computer. And oftentimes I'll have to turn on Spotify, like a focus playlist, because the boys will be like, my son was literally just playing his recorder in the background, or the Legos will get loud, just the rustling of the Legos. Sometimes I'll turn on focus music just because my ADHD, but let's keep going. Guys, I just found a commentary that backs up what I just said. The word biblical says that this isn't a 24-hour day beginning in the evening. This is literally what I was saying I look for, is like to not just me having my crazy thought, but to be backed up by a commentary and them also reiterate, yes, this is for sure 24-hour period, looking at God's fullness of provision. Yes, love that. Let's get back. Friends, so one of the most realistic aspects of my daily Bible study is having to call it quits. Like, eventually time is of the essence. It's a Saturday. It's time to have family time. I need to get dressed and go play outside with the boys or go spend time with my family. I've had a really solid Bible study this morning, and I think true wisdom, true worship is also knowing when to take it from the books and put our feet to action. I've been really passionate about encouraging our community online here to do that. Here's one way we can do it. Hey friends, what if I told you your Bible study could actually change someone's life half a world away? Not just your life, but their life too. In Kawangware, Kenya, families wake up every day with zero access to clean water. But for $50, we can step in, not only with a water filter that lasts 20 years, but with 3 discipleship visits, gospel conversations by local missionaries, and a connection to a solid local church. This isn't charity that replaces the church, it strengthens it. And the best part, it's not Americans flying in to save the day, it's local Kenyans, neighbors discipling neighbors in their own community. I went myself to check it all out. I paid my own way. It's not like they asked me to come out, but I can tell you this ministry is the real deal, and they're doing kingdom work. And that's why I want us Bible nerds to be a part of it. Joe and I already gave $5,000, which is 100 water filters with the discipleship and the missionaries coming to the homes and all of that. But I'm asking the Bible nerd community to join me to do something bigger. Let's fund 2,000 filters together. That's 2,000 families with clean water and the living water. Please don't assume someone else will cover it. If you're hearing this, the need is still real. There's something so valuable in the worshipful response of saying, yes, Lord, use me, even with my couple of bucks. So before you keep listening to this, pull up the show notes. You'll see there a link to give as a Bible nerd, and even the map of where you can track the impact of our Bible nerd community in Kawangware. You can see their faces, their names, some of the families I even got to meet who now have water because of you guys. Let's stop just reading the word and start living it out in our lives, even where it hurts, even in our wallets. Will you join me? Friends, it's so important that our Bible studies don't just end when we close the books, but they impact everything about our lives. And so now it's time for me to go live out what I've been studying in the way that I parent, in the way that I fold laundry, in the way that I spend time with my spouse, run errands, whatever today holds. So don't just think about your Bible study as something that ends all of a sudden when you close the books. You can keep ruminating on what you read. You can prayerfully keep talking to the Lord about what you learned, and then come back to it tonight is probably what I'll do. Tomorrow morning before church, etc. You'll note that I pulled out the Net Bible because I wanted to reference a couple stuff. That's another thing that I forgot to mention that I look at pretty much every week. They have translation notes like from translators, and one of my friends, Dr. Dan Wallace, who's like a seminary professor and he's on a bunch of boards for all the different NIV and helped with the NKJV translation and all those things. He's a Bible translator and textual critic and all that, and he was the New Testament editor for that translation, and they're like revolutionary because they have translator notes in their footnotes, and so I reference that all the time. But I also looked a couple times at Bible Hub. I always do, so I'm glad to mention that. But it's time for me to get back to real life. If you you want to see my commentary tour and hear a lot more about my thoughts around commentaries, check out this video here. And if you liked this style of Bible study with me, make sure to share this video and let me know in the comments that you loved it. But I have so many more on my channel. Go check them out. I'll see you guys in our next video. Bye guys.